Me? Yeah. Yay! Hi, friends. Welcome back to House Rules. I'm Rachel LaForce.
I'm Alex Getlin.
Is Alex Getlin. So we just decided we're doing it. We're just going to make a bonus episode. And
why not, right?
That's what we're going to do. And...
Well, first of all, this is House Rules Podcast. Let's explain. So normally we're live every Monday, and we will continue to live stream every Monday, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. But listen, why not do some bonus content? Why not give our listeners, our fans, our viewers some extra stuff while we're here? The whole Los Angeles is completely shut down, so what else are we going to do?
I just have so many thoughts and feelings.
Tell us how you feel, Rach. Fill in the listeners. But real quick, just to clarify, so we're still going to do our live stream every Monday at a normal time.
I don't actually even know what day it is today.
It's Thursday.
Okay.
But I've just decided in this moment right now here on July 2nd, 2020, that we're just going to do House Rules whenever we want in addition. So Monday, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern is our cornerstone time slot. We're always going to be there for you guys. But, follow us because we might just do bonus content impromptu like right now.
Yeah.
Shout out to Third Wheel Podcast Studio, by the way, where we are recording this.
Yes. And there was somebody lingering outside the door. So you sure that nobody is supposed to be in here now?
Yeah.
Okay, you check the schedule.
Yeah, there's no one scheduled right now.
Okay, I was just making sure. There was somebody
I saw you looking at the door, and we have a plexiglass.
Well, I was trying to look there to get you to look there, and you just kept going hard. You're not always the best on picking up signals.
I'm not.
Kind of brain dead.
But yeah, I would get a text, or someone would pop in if they needed to come in here right now. So.
Okay.
So for those of you who are unaware, they reopened LA for the most part. We were able to go into restaurants with masks and social distancing. People were able to do kind of the needs that they have day to day normally. And then yesterday, the governor just decided, oh, never mind, we're shutting back down because I guess they thought.
Well, no, let's dial that back. Okay. So everything breaks out. Nobody knows what to do. What are you doing on your phone? Do I have your attention? Do I not have your attention?
I'm going to check, make sure we're live right now. I'm going to pull up the...
We're live. I already saw it.
Oh, you saw it? Okay, we're good.
I didn't share it to mine. Do you want to share it to my Facebook?
Why don't you share it to your Facebook?
I don't know how.
You don't know how? How do you not pull...
I know how. It takes too long.
I'll do it.
You can do it. Here you go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Look at that. So many skills. Our kids are definitely going to be athletes. So... we woke up this morning and we were setting up our studio at home because we've been gone. Our house is a wreck. There's things everywhere. And we sat down to check levels and I started talking. I was like, do you just want to record a bonus episode? And you were like, yeah, just go change. We'll just go right now. And now we're here. So this was a completely impromptu choice, much like the governor's plan to open the state and then close it again. Do you know what I mean? Just making choices out of nothing. Now, here's what I just really want to...
Make America frustrated again. That's what it should be.
But it's also yes, I know it's frustrating and it's affecting all of us in very different ways. But the thing I just want to remind everybody is we have zero leadership right now in this country. And if you come for me being Trump, I'm no longer entertaining those. For a while, I was you have to have compassion and leave space for people who think differently than you. And at this point, I'm like, dogs. There's nothing that you could come to me and be like, well, no.
Wait. You don't think you should have compassion for people who think differently than you?
No, I'm saying when people in the beginning of this with Trump and people who were like, well, he said he's going to do this, he's going to do that, or I could still hold space for people supporting Trump. At this point, I just can't hold space for people anymore.
I understand that. Hold on. Wait. Trump is one of many people at fault for all of this.
I know, but I'm saying he's the face of it. So people that I'm not blaming this on Trump. Let me back up. That's not at all. You put that. That's not what I said.
Okay.
I'm simply saying we have zero.
I'm going to tweak the headphone volume just a tad. So
I'm saying that we have zero leadership in this country at this point. And so it makes sense to me that things are even more out of control because we don't have one unified voice, right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
During 9/11, well, that's because, you do this often. You don't let me finish my thought and then you already have an opinion. So sometimes it's good to just listen. And
maybe we shouldn't have done a bonus episode.
And hear somebody out, you know what I mean? I'm just saying.
Really?
But
Really?
But no, do you know what I mean? Like during 9/11,
I
it
get
was
it,
like
yeah.
Bush came and was like, here's what's going on. Like there, and it was like, there's always a unifying voice. We don't have a unifying voice.
Yeah.
In fact, we have a voice who's, it would seemingly be dead set on creating more destruction and division and chaos.
Sure.
Right. And so I feel like that's already, we're all just like so freaking lost just because of the circumstances, right? On top of, it's bizarre as a society to have so many resources to make things happen quickly, efficiently, digitally, like all of these things, yet we can't go and sit at a restaurant.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
know.
also like messing with our psyche of like, well, wait a minute. Like, but like there's all of these things that we can do, yet now like the smallest of tasks of like gathering and all of those things, we are just kind of like out the window.
Well, so back on your point of like where we're at leadership wise. I mean, I know you don't follow Trump's you're not on Twitter, and I don't follow Trump on Twitter, but I'll pop in and see what's going on just because I'm like I don't like the guy, but he is the leader of the.
You love being triggered.
That's not the right phraseology. I don't love being triggered. I love keeping tabs on the nonsense, if that makes sense. But anyway, like yesterday,
That was the most PR BS.
well, listen,
I get it. Keep going with your point. I'm just giving you a hard time.
This is one of the examples of like, what are you doing, man? You're the fucking president. Sorry, I cursed. I'm trying not to curse on here too much, but at a certain point, And like yesterday, he tweeted a video of Joe Biden giving a speech, and then he kind of like flustered his words and mumbled in, typical Biden fashion. And then the Curb Your Enthusiasm music started playing, and it was like, and it was just like, what are you doing, dude? I mean, really, like that. I understand, like, that's his shtick. He's the, troll in chief, right? He loves to, like, do all that crap on the internet. But it's just, that's your move right now? In the middle of all this, that's what you're going to do.
But that's what I'm saying, which is no wonder nobody knows what they're doing. Because nobody trusts anything that's coming out of the White House. The majority of people. There's still a lot of people who, like, really think that, like,
I don't think no. I don't think that's true. I think there's a core base that
that's still a lot of people.
I don't think it's that many, man. I think I think what's a way more accurate reflection is there are a lot of people who the same way folks tend to think like, well, I don't like or trust Biden, but he's a better option than Trump. There's the same mentality but flipped, where people like look at chaos in cities with people like, looting and rioting, and they think, oh, well, Trump's my better option than like the hardcore left nonsense. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like they're not like, we love Trump. They're like, well,
I guess I also feel like it's just like people, one thing, I think people are lazy, and why are you reading my phone?
I was making sure someone was. I have this thing making sure someone's not texting us being like, hey, something's wrong with the live stream. We had so many tech issues when we were in Atlanta that I know we're in the studio now and everything's great. And I decided to just sit across from you today, not be behind the computer.
Did you? Because you have had so many things to do. I am so distracted by you. Are you done?
Yeah, I was just making sure everything's A-okay. Why are you always picking at me
My
for
Little
this?
Anxious Pony.
Not a good series.
I don't know. They'd be pretty entertaining.
Yeah. Okay,
Just
so
a bunch of small horses being like, oh, I don't know how to make a decision.
you and I have fundamentally different views on how some of these things kind of transpire.
Like from the ground up?
Well, I've just noticed, well, let's go back to the other point real quick.
No. I want to hear more about what you were just saying, that you fundamentally think differently than me.
Well, I just remember, like, at the height of when all the protests were happening and there was a lot of, like, stuff going on, and then I was like, it's interesting that all of the situations where there's, like, mass protests are only happening in Democrat-led cities.
Mm-hmm.
And your attitude was because they're the only ones who care. Like, the people who live there are more open-minded.
Whoa. That's very dangerous language. I would not say it's that I think it's that the only people that care. I think in democratic cities, you tend to have poorer neighborhoods, more cities, and larger groups of people that have experienced
You mean a higher population, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cities where more people have been at the hands of injustice, like Los Angeles. So you have a lot of black and brown people. You have a lot of like poorer neighborhoods. You have people who have experienced oppression way larger than in red states. You're not going to have, you saw the only protest that happened was white people who couldn't get haircuts. Do you understand? So like people who are in situations of privilege, they have no reason to get out into the streets and like demand their rights because they're taken care of. And that's not shitting on people who are taken care of in this country, but I'm simply saying that like they have no reason to demand something better because their inherent needs are being met. People who are watching people who look like them be brutalized in the media, and then it's shown over and over again, but then nothing changes. Of course, those people are going to be like, absolutely not, no more, and go out in the streets. And that happens to be in bigger cities.
Yeah, I guess I just find it interesting that like, I wish Trump was not the current fate. And I'm not a Republican, obviously. I don't agree with most of the things in the Republican Party agenda.
Well, and unfortunately, we don't even know what the Republican Party or the Democratic Party even are anymore.
But that's what's so interesting is like Minneapolis, where the George Floyd thing happened, right? Everybody in charge there is a Democrat. And so it's interesting that like, okay, so Trump's the evil one. I agree. He's a terrible leader. But like the people who are the Democrat leaders are the reason that guy, you know what I mean? Like,
wait, so break this down. So you're saying when you talk about George Floyd thing, you're saying that's where George Floyd was murdered, was in Minneapolis.
Yes.
And that the police department and the city is run by mostly Democrats.
The mayor, the governor,
right.
Everybody who runs everything.
Okay, yeah. Right. So you're saying that because of that, but then they haven't taken any initiative and haven't charged anybody or there's been no action that's changed.
It's just what I find interesting is when
I'm not disagreeing with you. No. That's why I'm asking you, is that what you're saying?
Correct. What I'm saying is like, it's just interesting that like the cause of all of the problems that have happened with that arguably stemmed from, at least to a certain point, or at least while it was happening, it was all Democrats in charge. But the attitude is still, whatever we do, get the Democrat in office for this. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on. I'm not a conservative by any means. I'm just saying, like, that's clearly you're missing something here because you had Democrats in office and they didn't fix it.
I agree, but I think right now that argument is more about anything is better than Trump.
I understand.
Which I think behind the scenes, I don't really know how much better. Like, clearly the DNC pushed for Biden, right? They didn't actually want anybody with new ideals or thoughts, or right? So it's very clear of like, we are in the situation of like lesser of two evils. Do you want to hear, Sir Troll Trump for the next 4 years and let things get even more out of control? Or do you want a semblance of American values with hearing Biden?
I will say, because you know me, I'm trying to figure like, what is something I can just stand behind when I go into the ballot box, right? And it's like, I might as well just try Biden for 4 years, because why not? I mean, at this point, like, it's all just feels absurd anyway. So
well, but I think it goes back to why these conversations are so important, and like I'm choosing to educate myself, and it's so hard for me because my retention rate is so low. So it's like,
why do you think that is?
That my retention rate?
Because I remember we had an argument once, or a debate, or one of our civil but like heated debates about something, and I remember you were getting so frustrated because I kept like listing like stats and facts, and you're like, I know you can memorize this stuff better than me. It doesn't mean that my point's wrong. Or you had something to that.
Well, yeah, because I know the things I've read that are factually supported, but I was really like, I might have to just start printing things out, and I'm not kidding, and being able
pull out like, all right, here.
Well, it's like, why do I think my retention is low? Because I've had ADD and ADHD my whole life. It's the way my brain works.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it's not like, why do you think that is? It's not like, oh, I have an extra 10 pounds on because I've been at home more and haven't been exercising as much.
Hey,
there's not like, I don't know. I take a little bit of offense to that question.
Why are you offended by that?
Because it's like, oh, why do you think your retention rate's so low?
You brought it up.
Well, I know, but I'm saying I know why, because that's the way
Okay.
my brain works. It's not like a question for me.
What do you? Well, let's go back to our original point. Okay, so they tried to reopen Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah. Wow. We've gotten way off track.
I know. And then, well, this is where I'm at now. It's like, America, make a decision one way or the other. And I know, like, how can we all get online with, but it's we have to either open up everything and just say, do what you got to do. The consequences are they're going to be what they're going to be, or we got to go full Singapore. And I reference that because my cousin's there, and she's explained how, like, they're on, like, real lockdown. We tried to do this middle ground. It didn't work, and now it's worse.
Also, to be fair, we didn't really try a middle ground. Every state did it differently.
Yeah.
Everybody did it for a different length of time. And then Newsom made a knee-jerk reaction because after the protests was probably like, if we don't give people some freedom, they're really going to lose their mind. And so he opened everything up. Well, with opening everything up, seemingly out of nowhere, on top of, we just had all of these protests, on top of, like, people are more able to get tested now. Like that, why is nobody saying that? Where it's like, well, there's all these spikes. Of course there are, because now you can actually get tested. In certain areas, there's still certain places that, like, you can't get tested.
Yeah, we tried in Georgia. We couldn't.
So that's the thing where it's like, okay, there's also a lot of, I'm not saying, like, close it or don't close it, but I'm saying let's be honest and open about why these numbers are changing. That's the other thing. Like, our media and everything is so ass backwards at this point. It's like, this is my impression of the media. Ready? Like, there's no...
That's like that video of the goats, you know, the one where the goats
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. Like, people are just spouting out information. There's no rest and going, okay, so here's what we've learned this week. Let's talk about it. What does it mean? Where is it coming from? So we just keep making, like, more...
You know what I've learned this week? We will find infinite ways to divide ourselves in America. That's what I've learned.
But I don't feel that that's fair because the media is doing that. If we had people in charge who were presenting information on a place that is...
No, that's not why. That's not why. The reason is because we are hyper individualistic in this country. And my needs are always better than everyone else's collective needs. That's how we're and I don't, and, you know, I'm generalizing here, but I really think as Americans, we, you know, grow up, and it could be a worldwide phenomenon. I don't know. I'll just speak to the U.S., but I really feel like in this country, we value personal success, personal needs, personal interests, all that kind of crap so much that, I mean, this COVID thing to me highlights that more than anything. It's like, if it's not the better for me, or like whatever I feel like I represent, then it's not what is better for the country. And that's why we can't agree on anything. And the problem is that the attitude, so many people take the attitude of, like, it's either A, if you want to shut everything down, it means that you just want to leech off the government and get free money forever. Or B, if you want to open it up, you just are like this crazy, hyper greedy capitalist.
So I want to take you back to a couple of things. This idea of this is what Americans value.
Yeah.
That's problematic for me because the values and the rhythm and way that our country was built was based off of a few white guys, right? Generally speaking.
Fine.
So, no, hear me out. Don't roll your eyes before you even know what I'm going to say. So we built a society around patriarchal values, right? And people who literally, like, fled from a different place, and now we're like, okay, now we get to decide for us, right? So this idea of, like, you know, this is not what you said, but where it's like, millennials are like, now everybody needs a trophy, or like, it's all about me and my identity. Like, those things have been ingrained since the beginning of time of, like, take care of you first, like, you over other people, right?
Yeah.
Like, that even goes into, like, slavery of, like, I am better than these people. I have value over these people. I make money off of the, like, there are so many things that go into this recycled idea over and over and over again of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And where we are right now is a collective of what we've been doing, not in the past 10 years, not in the past 20 years, like literally since the beginning of America, of where we place our value in money, in profits, in, like, capitalistic ideas. that have gotten us to where we are. Because going back to what you were saying of like, if you want to live off of the government, but it's like we saw that this week. It's like I would have made more money from unemployment than I would have of going back and now my job. Obviously,
what do you
my
think
hours.
We should do? Because I know you're really upset.
But also my like hours have been cut, right?
Yeah,
so like if I was at my full capacity, it would be a little bit different. But it's like that's a major issue. We need to be paying people enough to where like they're being able to like, I mean, minimum wage used to be a thing that like allowed for a, this like burgeoning middle class.
Right.
Now you can't survive on minimum wage. That was like, we broke our, the hair product that I get is like chemical and specific. So of course the one place that I can get it is Amazon.
Right.
So we logged back onto our Amazon and got that, right? We haven't been ordering anything from
Well,
there.
the reason is it's like, this is the perfect example of like how like you get trapped in these cycles, right? So we ended our Amazon Prime account because we're going to try and not use Amazon as much to help small business. And then there's this product you mentioned. It's just way easier to get it on Amazon. It's very hard to find it other places. Well, without Amazon Prime, it's like $13 for shipping. Or with Amazon Prime, shipping is free. But so it evens it. So I might as well get the Prime.
I know, but it's also the same thing of like I said earlier today. I was like $13.99 for shipping and handling. They don't even pay the people that are shipping and handling.
So speaking
barely
of
$14 an hour.
I did have one headline I wanted to pull up to show you. I'm going to read it out loud, okay? So this is from Fox Business. I guess it goes, Amazon driver abandons delivery van, says he quits in a viral tweet. So this guy was, this guy's an Amazon delivery driver, and he left the truck at a gas station and just said, fuck it, I'm out of here. So I'm trying not to curse on this podcast.
Just let it go.
I know
every time you're like, sorry for cursing. It's like, okay, then don't curse or do.
But he tweeted, I quit Amazon. I guess they bleeped part of the tweet. Goes, I left the van on 12 Mile on Southfield. Y'all can have that shit, and it's full of gas with keyless ignition. I'm done.
So that was it. There's no like background as to why he just like got fed up and was like.
Well, he said he was sick. He said he was sick of working 13-hour days for $15 an hour. And he said I can make $15 an hour cutting grass. I was sick of working 13-hour days for this company that treats me like dirt.
Right. So that's the thing where it's like, it's so I feel like the right media, like the left is basically just like abolish everything, get rid of everything, everything's broken. Right. Well, nobody's going to respond to that because it's way too far left and it's not paying attention to what the center is. Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't give any acknowledgement to things that are in the middle, right? Are you listening?
Yeah, I'm seeing there's people chiming in on our live stream.
Okay.
So Ross Kimball said, this is so rude and bad timing, but are you two sitting next to each other or is this a split screen situation? Is there an inside joke there?
No, he probably was just actually wondering. Hi, Ross.
It's a split screen. And then
if you guys are not following Ross Kimball on social media, you're doing social media wrong.
Yeah. If you're chiming in live, I'll respond to the comments later. I can't really do the comments and talk
I know
to you.
we don't have a third producer in here. It's hard to go back and forth on those. But, we're figuring it out. Today was also just like we woke up with like so many opinions and thoughts and I was like, we need to go.
So I have a serious question.
Okay.
Okay. So here's where the dilemma hits for me.
Okay.
Yes, I think people should always get paid a fair living wage. I agree with that. I mean, otherwise, like, what's the point? The problem becomes when the number of people looking for work is so much higher than the work available, then it sort of is like, okay, well, they're just responding to the market.
Sure.
Now employers should, I would think they should have like morals and ethics and want to pay people more. But in a competitive marketplace, which is what the problem with like hyper-capitalism.
Right, which is what we've become. Because capitalism is great.
Capitalism is always better than socialism and communism, in my opinion.
I think we're seeing the negative effects of capitalism right now. And I don't think that they actually create a better... I'm saying this as a blanket statement because some people are going to come at me and be like, you don't want to be like in communism. Slow down. I understand that. I'm not anti-American, but I'm saying that
I'm
also
kidding, you're not.
no,
You're
but
not,
I'm
you're
also
not.
to say that like just to be like America and like on the side of a
I
team
agree.
without paying attention to it is extremely
It's very
toxic
dumb. Yeah.
and just as damaging.
Yeah.
We are seeing right now in real time that capitalism can destroy America. And I know that's a very strong statement, but I'm saying by seeing the profits of we're streaming on Facebook right now of like Facebook, Amazon, all these mega companies. So going
Yeah.
back to your question of how do you mitigate that? Taxes. And you want to know why taxes aren't mitigated? Because the people who are making the most money are feeding it into our government.
I know.
There's
We have
no
this-
separation between business and the government, and that's also so much of why we've ended up in this position. Because there's no separation.
I understand that. And we have this discussion every week. Every week we end up talking about this and you get so worked up. My question, though, is what do you do about it? Because to get all angry and say the rich aren't paying enough taxes, I agree with you. I totally agree. Remember we were looking at that thing? I have a side project I'm working on for a new mini series I'm going to launch soon. And so I have this whole thing I'm learning about like the wealth of like the mega rich. And it was showing that I think Bill Gates, he's given like insane amounts of money away, but it still is like less than 1% of his total fortune, which, you know, so the question becomes then, how do you create a system where the wealthiest in the world give back to the rest of society? What do you do?
So there's a few things, right? The first, which what makes it the most difficult is if we're continuing to vote in the same type of folks, meaning people that will continue to protect the uber wealthy, right? Then nothing will change, right? So that's why voting in, outliers or people who, really have similar values to you or, all of these things, challenging and really asking, of our politicians to address these very real issues, then we aren't going to get to a different place,
but
right?
See,
because all of these things are happened based off of who is voting. Because to me, if I have to pay out 25% of what I make, then why are people who make 70 times more than me?
See, the real problem is that this is a very, very pared down answer. But effectively, we value the shareholder class over the working class in this country because income tax rates are way higher than capital gains tax rates. I'm not an expert on this.
We need to make friends with an economist. That's what I'm going to manifest this for myself, just like a real groovy, super educated economist. You know what I mean?
Yes, but my understanding is that no, I agree with you, but you interrupted me in the middle of my statement. You did, and you get really annoyed at me when I interrupt you. So can you just please respect that, I'm trying to hold you to the same standard you hold me
continue.
to? For real?
Yeah.
No, but okay, so for example, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at the most recent election. There were, I think, looking at the people who were running for president on the Democrat side, there were 3 pretty solid outliers that, I know Tulsi never really had any momentum, but she was a big outlier. Yang was an outlier. Bernie was definitely an outlier, and he got pretty close. I mean, he almost had it. And they pushed him out, which shows me that, again, and I would say over and over again, I am not a Republican. I don't trust the Republicans. But you can't trust the Democrats either.
Right,
Hold on. I'm not done with my point.
Because it's just about money. It's not about left or right. When you have that much money and that much power.
Dude, stop interrupting me. I didn't finish my point.
Okay, go ahead, dude.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like you get so annoyed at me, and then you interrupt me.
Okay, go ahead.
So what really frustrates me is when people always say, this election's too important. You can't vote third party. It's too important. Every election is too important. The whole system is designed to make you think it's too important, and you can never not vote for the lesser of two evils. But if people in this country really woke up and understood that that game is being played every 4 years and thought about actually putting support behind third and fourth and fifth party candidates, we could see some serious monumental change. And that's what it's going to take. It's not going to happen voting Republican. It's not going to happen voting Democrat. You have to find a way to, and I know it won't happen overnight. It could probably take the better part of a decade plus. But the only way we're going to see any real change in this country is if we as Americans decided, hey, screw this two-party system. We have to do something else. It's the only way it's going to happen. Okay, now I'm done. Now you can interrupt me. You don't want to say anything?
I'm the applause of everybody that's standing and
Well,
clapping for you. I wanted to just give them a moment.
You have to understand, it's a little frustrating when you just...
Okay, I know, but it's also like, dude, this is where we get to that place where it's like we're so similar yet so different because you do those same exact things towards me. This is our marriage happening IRL right now. But yeah, so I'm
excited for our marriage.
Me too.
You want to talk about that?
Getting married?
Yeah.
Yeah, I finally got my wedding dress.
You did? Wait, did you want to comment on my point, or do you want to...
I do.
Okay.
That I agree with you. That's what it's like. I'm not disagreeing with you. The difference is, and this is why when people are like, hating on protests and riots and looting, I'm like, stop. Listen, acknowledging the damage and the violence is very important.
Yeah.
But when you when you choose to look here instead of looking here, zero change is happening. And that is why it's so important to pay attention to all of these things. People don't go out into the street and yell and scream and destroy things because they're having a good day. They're doing that because they have no other way of getting your attention.
Right.
And they're fed up. And so,
but a part of that also is because everybody's been trapped for 3 months.
Certainly. But it's also like, I mean, again, that's the thing of like, think about how angry you are that you've had to stay inside for 3 months. Now imagine like, being black in America and essentially like not being able to get ahead because of where, I know this is a blanket statement, but I'm just saying where it's like the amount of people who generation after generation after generation in black and brown communities have tried to get ahead and haven't been able to because of resources. And then everybody looks at them and goes, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, I think that's a very simplistic way of looking
I know, but I'm saying I'm happy to like unroll all of that and like actually have a conversation about that because I know so many people right now are like, that's just a blanket statement. And it's also like, but that also, if that's your response, that also tells me so much information about how you have existed in our American society.
Right,
because if there isn't a part of you that acknowledges that that's very real, that also means that you've been blessed to not exist within that world. And I understand that, race and religion, immigration, all of these things, that's even a totally different piece of the pie than capitalism and wealth and greed. Yeah. Right. And I think a lot of the way that now I'm saying this as a white person, but I think a lot of the way that we begin to really shift and integrate race equally and creating more equities is by going after wealth and greed first.
Yeah. See, so my problem is that I think that when I see major corporations just like immediately backing these social movements, I'm always suspicious because
100.
Yeah. It's like, same thing with a great example was somebody, I forget who, somebody pointed out. It's like, when Pepsi makes a rainbow soda can for Pride Month, they do that here. They don't do that in Russia, where Russia is a very homophobic country to generalize. They're because the thing is, like, I think it's very important to educate ourselves and talk about race in a critical way and how we can be better. But remember that hyper focusing on that and not focusing on how, like, these hyper wealthy corporations just fuck the American public. Like it's a way to, like, the people at the bottom and the people a little bit above them can fight each other, and then the people at the very tippy top are like, yeah, you guys deal with that. You don't have to. Does that make sense?
No, I agree with you.
But
and I
keep going.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think that again, the way there are so many different subsets and ways to everybody to point up, to like look up. Like if I were running a campaign of some sort, I would come up with some sort of slogan that's better than look up, because that, you know what I mean? Like that's terrible. But just improvising here. But I'm saying the idea of like, stop pointing at each other and everybody stand together and look up. That's who we're going after. We're going after, and not meaning like, like taking tiki torches and like, burn it all down, but saying we have to begin to dismantle and hold these people accountable. Because that's the other thing. People are like, we're in a huge economic crisis in this country. No, we're not. 10% of the people and the people that are continue to thrive through this are going to be just fine. It's
I understand
it's me,
that,
it's our neighbors.
But again, it's one thing to be like, this is unfair. You have to have solutions. The idea of just tear it all down doesn't do anything.
I didn't say tear it all down. And also, it's like that language is so damaging as well, which is why I keep that, this idea of like conscious language, which is so important. It's like, again, like starting with the tagline of defund the police, we were already dead in the water right there.
Yeah.
Of like, unless your mission is like abolish the police, which a lot of people are, and I haven't come around to that yet because
that is an insane idea.
Because, well, yes, to you and me, to people that have seen people next to them in the street die, be abused, like all of these things at the hand of the police.
I understand.
They're coming at it from a very different point. But for you and I, or the majority of Americans, right? The problem is we have asked police to do 75 different jobs that we've trained them for like less than 1%.
I understand that, but why don't you think it's interesting that like the police issue right now is all anybody wants to talk about, when really the hyper wealthy, it has no bearing on them. Like the more we talk about the relation, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't, like there's a lot that needs to be overhauled and fixed with the policing in this country, but the more we just obsess over and over and over about like police versus poor people, police versus brown people, police versus black people. What about like the 1% hyper wealthy investor class versus all of us? That's what I want to talk about. That's the real problem. The more we can focus on like, and I'm not saying we shouldn't. There obviously are bad cops. Derek Chauvin is a example of a monster who got away with terrible things over and over and over again. I get that. But like, I really feel like partly why this has been such a focus is it's easy for people to like understand this versus like what happened in 2008 with all these, major financial institutions. Even for me, I read about this stuff and I still have a hard time really grasping like what happened and how we go against that. Does that make sense?
Well, it is and it's not. It's regulation. And again, but the people that make the regulations or the people who make the rules are the people with all the money. So again, it's just this self-fulfilling prophecy over and over and over again. And that stems into creating more equities and equalities for black and brown communities. That goes into
how do you do that?
So that's what I'm saying of like how that starts is it's more people being willing to, I mean, you have to think about those people didn't get to those positions. Those companies and, monopolies didn't get to the place that they are by not talk about that idea of like, I'm putting me first.
Yeah.
They didn't get there by like helping other people. They
Sure.
got there by abusing other people and other privileges and getting all the way up there. So to your point of like, how do we begin to like, not only like to begin to dismantle that, you have to integrate it. I mean, and the other problem is people don't want a plan that they're not going to see all the way through. People are not recognizing this is something that is going to take another 50 to 100 years. If we really want to dismantle what we've created. So if we
you got to be more specific.
Okay, so what you're talking about, how are you lost right now?
No. Dismantle capitalism?
But you're talking about this wealthy 1%.
Watch your hand because you're starting to block the camera.
This wealthy 1%, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about how do we get there and disseminate it, right? We have to get there first. Do you know how long and how much money it's going to take to be able to get enough people that think differently into that inner circle? That alone is going to take a really, really long time,
Sure.
So it's like thinking that just overnight we're going to be able to like dismantle this, situation and then have something that services everybody. That's a pipe dream. You have to be willing to recognize that like our day-to-day life is probably not going to change very much.
Yeah.
But it's worth it for all of the generations that are going to come after us, that they deserve something better than we have. And most people don't. Understandably so. People probably stop listening to this because they're exhausted.
I know.
Well,
it's interesting because we came in here, we're like, we're not going to do segments. We're just going to go and talk. But you were very,
but does what I'm saying make sense?
Of course. Yeah. But this is where we're fundamentally different is I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think when we look at things in the world that are wrong or broken or even if things that are right, I think, to look at it from just a brass tacks, check my feelings, what just like practically makes sense and what doesn't and what can like be implemented. And you tend to lead from like, well, I know in my heart what's right and wrong, so facts be damned, like morals are like what I know morality and like, that's what should be the leading factor.
Well, I also think a lot of time the facts that are in place right now are based off of what we've created. So they're not necessarily fair to use and everything. I think that they obviously facts are important and logic is important. I don't think I've ever discredited that. But if we're looking at things that have been created, we're looking at numbers that are based off of white communities doing better than black and brown communities.
Right.
We're looking at, numbers of people that have been incarcerated based off of the color of their skin, based off of minor infractions. They didn't have money to hire somebody to speak on their behalf. They got a public defender instead. So we're looking at all these things that already have to do with class and like class warfare, right? So the numbers are based off of the society we've already created. So they're helpful. We need to look at them. We need to acknowledge them. But also saying that like this is what it is versus what it could be, we're looking at it through two different lenses. Because the lens that I'm choosing to look at it is, okay, so these numbers and what we've created now is based off of what we have done.
Right.
So if we want to this is the platform that we're starting from, and we want to get to a better place, we're starting from here. But if somebody comes at me and says, well, the numbers are here, sure. The numbers are here because they've been there to protect.
You got to give me some examples, because you're sort of saying like, well, all the facts are irrelevant because, they can all be skewed. And like, there's no, it's starting to sound like a point where it's like, well, just anything you present is not really trustworthy. Or
that's not what I'm saying.
I guess
that's what you're choosing to hear.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, so like one time you told me, you were like, well, there was a woman that was in her house and you guys kind of got into it because she was challenging you on like feminist ideals, right? And you guys were having this debate.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing you say, well, based off of numbers, women are more likely to be nurses and teachers. That was a very problematic stat for me to hear you say.
That's not what I said. I know. I remember.
So what did you say?
So I said we were arguing something to the effect about like the nuances of the wealth gap and why men earn more than women. And I said, yes, that is true, that on average men far out earn women. But it's not just as simple of like because of sexism. I'm sure that does exist. I'm not going to deny the fact that women don't deal with sexism in the workforce. Of course they do. However, if you want to have a real intellectual look at why that exists, you have to look at all the factors. So one factor is statistically, women tend to go into certain fields more than men and vice versa. So for example, men tend, and I'm just numbers wise, men tend to go towards jobs that are longer hours and more dangerous, like working on an oil rig, for example, or something of that likeness. Whereas women, statistically, of the same like education level and whatnot, tend to go into things that tend to pay less, like childcare or teaching. Now, it could be social conditioning that pushes people towards that. It could be that's just how they're biologically programmed. Men want to be more like alone and do dangerous work, and women want to be like more nurturers. I don't know, but I was just simply highlighting that is a factor, that like the market values those jobs with a higher pay because they're harder and more dangerous. Now, you could argue if that's fair. But the fact remains that is part of why when you look at that figure. And so she was like, "It's still wrong. It's still wrong." It's like, well, fine. You can argue if you think it's wrong, but the fact isn't that like you have to at least consider.
So, right.
It's not just like because everyone is sexist and that's why the numbers are off.
Well, we do live in a sexist society, number one, but number two. Right. So this idea of like what facts are, right? So you're saying statistically, right? Well, those statistics exist because societally our conditioning or what options were available to women are different than what they were for men. So you're already
yeah, but now that's not the case, and women still tend to go into those fields, and men tend to go in those fields more often. So I'm not saying
right, because again, so over time, over and over and over again, seeing real systematic change is something that takes an incredibly long time. So I think that it's you, in my opinion, I think you're a little unwilling to come over to my side a little bit.
That's what I'm saying. So yours, what I hear the narrative a lot is that if there are discrepancies, it has to be because of racism, sexism, things like that. That has to be the cause. And I'm like, no, it's a part of the cause. It's a factor, and there's a debate about how much of it. But that's not just to argue like, well, women earn less because everybody's sexist. That is not accurate. It's so inaccurate. But
why do you think that it clearly triggers you? Why do you think that makes you so angry?
Because it's fundamentally dishonest, and it doesn't help get to the actual. Because if you want to have a real intellectual conversation about how to be better, you have to look at like, okay, so what are the fields that tend to pay the most amount of money? So let's say finance, science, tech, whatever. Okay, so then you see those are the fields that pay the most amount of money. So if you really wanted to shrink the wealth gap between males and females, then you should encourage women to go into those fields. Like, that's the conversation to have. How can we encourage women?
But even when they do, I mean, if you look at, so let's just say in movies, right? Something that you and I know more about. If you have two stars that are going to make just as much money, so one's a man and one's a woman, right? Identifying.
Yeah.
And we've seen this time and time again that women have left projects because they're like, why am I not getting paid as much as my counterpart?
Sure. Okay, so there's an argument. It could be that the studio is just sexist and prejudiced against the woman, or it could be that male, in that case, is a bigger star than the female, and the return on investment when the project gets put out. I mean, that's the thing. It's like it could be sexism. It might be that, like, there was one famous one recently with like Mark Wahlberg and somebody else, and it was like people argue like, yeah, but Mark Wahlberg's a way bigger star.
But we've also seen this before where like Jennifer Lawrence has left projects too. She's arguably one of the biggest movie stars.
The last people I have any sympathy for are famous Hollywood actors complaining they don't earn enough.
Right, but you're saying like give me examples and I'm giving them to you. Because from where I sit, it feels as though you don't like hearing as a white man that potentially you're like, I genuinely feel, because I know you, that if you had any other experience in the world, right?
Sure.
Like, I don't think that you would be arguing as much of like, but this is the fact. Because you simply haven't experienced anything where you have been made to feel second. So to you, you have to come from fact because you haven't experienced it.
Right. But don't you see how that's kind of fundamentally broken? Be like, well, you'll never be able to understand it, so you just have to accept that you're wrong.
No, I'm not saying
that. Of course you are. That's what you're saying right now.
No,
you're like, well, because
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that there has to be a sense of acceptance of you or I both couldn't possibly understand everyone else's experience.
Sure, I'm not.
So to come to come to any sort of debate and say, "Well, I've never seen it, so maybe it exists."
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
You said maybe it's because of sexism. No. Maybe it's because of this thing. When like,
but
women couldn't even go to college for an incredibly long time after men. So this idea that you keep saying of like, well, if we just push women this way, like then we'll fix it. It doesn't have anything to do with sexism. Like,
that's not what I said. What I said is it's fundamentally dishonest to just say, well, the whole reason women earn less than men is for sexism, is because of sexism.
But I don't feel real educators are saying that.
That is the exact example you gave. Is that girl I was arguing with was saying, well, because clearly the workforce
right. I said
is sexist.
Educated people. I'm not saying she's not educated, but I'm saying the educators that are out there talking about the wealth gap, specifically between men and women,
right,
are coming at it both from a place of fact and education. And so I was just using that as a jumping off point of like going back to this idea because you said, well, it's not fair just to say that facts aren't real. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in order to create change, it is important to recognize that facts or statistics are based off of how far we have gotten.
Okay.
So to use those as a starting point, we have to acknowledge why those numbers are the way that they are.
I understand that, but I want to go back to the point I was making before, right? So a very simple way to, like what we were talking about earlier, there is a pay gap between men and women. Now, most people would say, well, let's try and shrink that, make it as small as possible, or if non-existent, that'd be wonderful. But again, the question is, how do you do that? Well, the fields that tend to pay the most, men go into more than women. Now, why is that is a debate. So STEM and other like science, technology, finance, those sorts of things, there's a question of like why men go more into that than women. It could be social conditioning. It could be sexism. It's probably a combination of all factors. But to just say, well, because the workforce is sexist, so it must be that we don't.
Well, I've never said that.
I know, but like what I'm saying is though that you're saying like, oh well, the facts existed to support a system that was inherently like evil or wrong or whatever.
First of all, those words are damaging. Those are not words that I said. I again have said that it is important when you are coming into a debate from a place, and you as a universal you, okay,
Right.
not just you. When you are coming into a place using facts and figures, you have to acknowledge that those facts and figures exist because of the society that supported it.
Fine, but then okay, so then so then how do you have any debate about anything? Then you're just saying like, well, every fact and figure you bring is skewed because of the system.
No,
it
I'm
came
saying
from,
that they
so-
need to be acknowledged. In the
Okay.
same way, so if we say that black people commit more crimes and that's why they're in jail more, that's not necessarily true. The amount of like white people that I grew up with that got caught with cocaine
Yeah,
or
yeah.
weed or I'm just
I know, but
saying,
you constantly lecture me as if I don't agree with you on this. I do
I'm
agree
not.
with you.
We're having a debate. It's not about lecturing you. So if you're feeling like whatever feelings you're having, then like deal with those. But
Yeah.
like I'm not coming at you. I'm stating my point of view, which is to be clear of this idea of I'm not saying that numbers and statistics aren't important. I'm saying that it is also, as educated people, especially the more educated you think you are, it's important to acknowledge why those numbers are the way they are.
Yeah.
And how can we use those numbers to create a better system for everyone? That's what I'm saying. And if that's idealistic, then like, okay. But I think that it would be so dumb to not acknowledge where our numbers come from.
Sure.
I mean, that's the same way of like, if you're like, okay, we've created this company and we know that now we've made this much money. Well, figuring out where did that money come from? What is the support of that money? That's incredibly important to know. How are you going to make more money? So it's the same thing of like, okay, so if we know our numbers on any given subject, on the economy or any thread of our society, here are the facts and figures and statistics of that debate or field, right? We have to know where those statistics and numbers came from in order to figure out what they mean.
Okay.
I don't know why that's not like a crazy idea.
It's not a crazy idea, but it just feels like there's a lot of, I don't know. Anyway, I don't even remember. What did you want to talk about? This
Well, we
episode?
started with
Every episode, you always take it back to this. You always get so worked up and you want to just like hammer on these like social justice points.
okay, what's wrong with that?
I mean, it's
we
just
got a lot of people that are hurting. What's wrong
I know,
with
but it's
being
like it's a little exhausting.
well, I'm sorry you feel exhausted.
I mean, it's fine, but it's like this. It's like the same topic every time. It's like, let me ask you this: what are you doing day to day to make the world better? What are you doing day to day to like fix all the things that you think are so broken in society?
Well, I think the first thing is deciding if I want to stay here and keep, trying to do things that feel more self-serving, or is there a way that I can utilize my voice to do something else that creates more change? So
Okay.
I think that's the first thing of like fundamentally, for the first time in my life, of really seeing how broken our system is and trying to make a decision of, is staying in the position I'm in right now the best use of my voice, or is there something else I can be doing? So I think that's the first thing. Unfortunately, I'm not economically in a situation where I can be giving out money. I mean, that's just the situation. So the way that I'm choosing to utilize my voice,
we could cancel our whole wedding and give that money away.
sure,
You could. I mean, you have to acknowledge you're making a choice not to.
sure, okay, I acknowledge that choice. I acknowledge that my joy is important as well as being able to give back. But I don't think that like me being a martyr also does anything. That's saviorism. That's performative. I don't feel like not having anything is in some way proving my care to these causes. So that's my response on that. I don't think that that's in any way showing that I don't genuinely care or want to figure out a way to be in service of these causes.
Yeah. But I guess you're still figuring it out, what you want to do?
Yeah, I think I'm still figuring out how do I want to utilize my voice. I don't think that like for me, I don't think running for any sort of office is in like the cards for me. And, as far as like getting into our community, I think we're still trying to figure out like where are we going to build community? Is it going to be here? Or are we going to go back to Atlanta? So for me personally, I feel like I'm very much at this tipping point place of how much of all of this is for me to take on. What areas of it could I be most useful? And I think if nothing else, it's like having conversations like these is also a great first start of like having a conversation, putting it out there into the world, like being willing for me to like be wrong, being willing to like learn more, being willing to like have difficult conversations. I think first and foremost, like that's important.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry that I've exhausted you.
Well,
that wasn't my intention.
Well, it just is a bit of it's like hearing the same thing over and over again. It's like, okay, but for what? Like I understand like there's things that are wrong in the world, but like we're just sitting here talking about it every day. Like why not what are we doing about it?
I don't know. What do you want to do about it?
I don't know, but it just seems like every time we do a podcast, this is always like the agenda that you want to like hyper focus on.
Okay, so then I also resent that statement because like today when we started talking at home and like the studio isn't set up there yet, and then I was like, well, let's just do a bonus episode, and you're like, all right, well then let's just go talk. I mean, are you just upset because I haven't been like, what's the deal with cereal? Like, what do you?
No,
like,
it just feels like you have a lot of anger towards what's going on in the world, and which I understand.
Of course.
And then it's like
people are being slaughtered in the street, and then people are saying, well, they looted Target, like, but nobody is regarding that. People are saying like, these are all blanket statements, but being like, oh, well,
well, no one got slaughtered looting a Target. That's
I know. I'm saying that the reason looting happened, right, was because people are being essentially murdered in the streets. And so people got angry. But then rather than going, oh, we need to be paying attention to like why we're seeing these things viscerally in literally a news feed. But then we say that we've come so far because we don't tar and feather people in a town's, in like,
I get what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean? Like we think that we're so above this like brutality and like barbaricness of humans, yet we're totally fine to see somebody, like suffocated to death in our news feed. Like that's.
But we weren't fine with it. People were outraged as soon as they saw it.
So that's why I'm saying that when people are like, don't pay attention, are not choosing to put the lens that way and are choosing to put the lens on, well, look at all of this looting and this is awful and this is violence, right? And that's not okay. So when that
was like 2 days of the protest. The looting's all over.
I understand. I'm just talking. I'm not coming at you. What's the deal, man? Like you tell me it's like, oh, you're so angry. Like, what are you going to do about this? And then I'm just trying to share a point of view and you're over there like freaking seething. Like, what's the deal?
I'm not seething.
Well, don't come at me, man. It's like,
I'm gonna check the comments from our live stream, see if anybody has any thoughts.
I mean, people are probably like,
we're gonna check in on the viewers, see there's a lot of comments here. Let's see here. Okay. There's a lot, yeah. Hey, Steve pointed out women are dominated in the medical field. Yes, that's true. And then Bonnie said, amen, Rachel. Yeah, we need to have an engineer to help us sift through the.
I know, but and I think that that's interesting though, because like you said, Alex, you were like, how, like, what are we doing right to like change these things or like have effective?
I just think it needs. Look, I think it is always good to learn about someone else's plight in the world, educate yourself in general. Be critical of things and analyze them. But I also think it's important to like step away from that and be like, not right now. I'll come back to it. It needs to be okay to be like, I know it's important. I need a second. And then I'll revisit it. Versus like, again, it takes me back to my point. Whatever people decide is the most important thing to them, everybody else has to agree, or they're bad. They're the bad people. If you don't agree that this person's thing that they're most upset about isn't the worst thing in the world right now, then you're on the bad side. That's not conducive for civil society.
Okay. So what do you think we should do?
Well, as I've said more and more, I think that Americans need to wake up that this two-party system where they just convince us to vote for the lesser of two evils is fundamentally broken. And I know people think it's insane. Oh, you're third party. That's ridiculous. I don't feel that way. I know that people think that, and I'm probably going to vote libertarian not that I am like a libertarian necessarily.
I don't know. You were really big on their principles.
Hold on. Again, it's that to me, this election proves more than ever that we just have garbage leadership on both ends. And if you vote for one of those two, fine. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. But you have to acknowledge you're just putting a Band-Aid on an open wound. And you're really not fixing anything. And we have to have a serious conversation as Americans how, like, we, the people, have the power in this country if we figured out how to get along better and speak to each other human to human.
Amen.
We are so quick to be like, look at those idiots over there. When really, like, poor people in inner cities and poor people in rural America have way more in common with each other than, you know, whatever, like, random person of the same skin tone happens to have with them. Do you know what I'm saying here? Like,
so then how do we create spaces for conversation and communion where we can make and enact the seeds of change for what you're talking about? How do we begin to
stop creating a system where if people don't agree with your political ideologies, they have to be evil. They have to be the bad people that you ice out.
So that conscious language, that's a thing that's important.
First of all, one thing you've definitely taught me the importance of that more people need to have is the how important emotional intelligence is. People do not have emotional intelligence in this country. And I really think people need to do whatever it takes to get there, to have that so that they are able to have hard conversations with other people that are different than them, that think differently, that have a different lifestyle, and understand, like, 99% of, maybe not 99%, 90% of people are just good humans. And they act shitty in tough situations because it could be a number of reasons. But it doesn't mean that you just ice somebody out because they had, like, a public freak out and it, you know what I mean? Like, that is not a conducive way to run a civil society. People have to learn how to talk to people that think differently than them and work together and live together. I mean, starting at a local level, that's great, you know, being part of your community and everything. But it's so, to me, what is so toxic, what is so wrong is if you live in a place anywhere in this country, whether it be West Hollywood or rural Michigan, whatever, to just decide, well, my way of life, that's what makes sense. And those people over there, they're the bad ones. I mean, that is so broken, and that is what will lead to civil war. That is what will lead to the destruction of the United States.
Well, and it's also, I agree, but it's also where, you know, and you have brought this to my attention of, like, maybe America really is too big.
Oh, absolutely, it's too big.
And it's not like, I think that for folks, and this is speaking from a place of privilege, I've been able to tour a lot of the U.S. I also have family that sit differently politically, religiously, that are also in different parts of the country. So even being exposed to that, all of those elements have even shown me. So it's so interesting of, like, you know, all of my friends that are here in Los Angeles, and, like, they are in such a bubble and really that much of, like, how much they're just screaming at each other.
I know.
The same thing. And again, where it's like, not that that's not important, but if you're not taking that beyond your circle, then it's futile. And so it is very much like that. I hear what you're saying of, like, how damaging that can be, because it's like, well, if somebody doesn't agree with me, then, like, get rid of them. And it's like, okay, well, but then again, you're still, you know, it's like, and I'm so grateful for this call that I've seen happening, which is like a cancel culture, because it doesn't do anything. And then all we're doing is we're definitely not enabling people to utilize their voice, because the only voices we want to hear are the ones that we agree with. And you're right. That is so scary and damaging. And, you know, it's like what we should be able to do is we should be able to have conversations with people, the people that we're choosing to spend our life with, and go, you and I do not agree on everything. But what we do agree on is our commitment to continue to learn. And what we do agree on is our commitment to continue to hear each other. And what we do agree on is our commitment to continue to challenge each other in a way that is healthy. And that is what creates better societies. But it's also not, ignoring the fact of what you were saying of like, our country is just very big.
Well, what I've realized is a country as big as the United States can't really work as a democracy. Because if you look at other...
Well, it can if there's more than two parties, to your point. If
Sure,
people got to vote on 5 parties, then we might have a little bit more of a chance.
But like, we have... I think it's wonderful how many rights we have in America. But when you look at countries that have a population bigger than ours or comparable to ours, and they seem to like hold it together, like China or Russia or something, they have way fewer rights. So that's the only, like, you have to either, like, in order for this many people to like fall in line under a leadership, it has to be a thing where it's like, well, they have to fear the boss, basically.
Yes, but I agree.
I don't want that, by the way. I'm not advocating.
Okay, thank you for laying that out there. What if this was the episode we all learned that Alex is actually like a communist? You know what I mean? That would be uncomfortable.
No, you're like, well, you mean like a fake communist, like in China?
Yeah, it was a joke.
But I'm saying these countries that claim to be communist are actually dictatorships,
right.
And they're not real communism.
Totally. But again, I think that is where, and yes, where it's like, Rachel, like you come to all this work from like a place of emotion or like spirituality or whatever. And it's like, yeah, of course I do. Because people forget when all of these systems were put in place, there were like far fewer than even 1 million people living in America.
Yeah.
So these systems, we've literally outgrown them.
That is accurate.
Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
We are literally, we're basically asking a grown man to wear the same shorts he wore as a toddler.
Yeah. It's kind of funny.
And it's like, and we're asking him to like do tasks. And it's like he can't bend over, so he's just kind of doing this, and like moving.
Let me ask you this:
if like we're asking someone, do you know what I mean?
If you were President
LaForce, we've given America a teeny tiny little baby fork, right? But now their hands have grown to giant hands, so we have a giant with giant hands trying to eat with a little baby fork. It's like that's what I'm saying. We've outgrown all of these systems, and yet we're carrying this tradition of like, that's not what our founding fathers want. It's like our founding fathers would shit themselves by looking at the internet. Do you understand? Like, we have grown past these systems. Why are we so stubborn and unable to go, oh, maybe on both sides, we need to create more flexibility of realizing the system we've created no longer works because there's 40 million people who live in California. Just California.
I know. That's the funny part. Well, you know what? And it's the thing is, too, like, it is funny to me. I mean, the Constitution is a great document, I guess. I've never actually read it in full, to be honest.
Can that be our merch?
The Constitution.
The Constitution's a great document, question mark.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just like, to your point, though, yeah, it's like, why do we cling on to this thing that, but the other end is like, burn it all down and start over is a bad idea. So that's where I get frustrated when, like, we kind of dabbled in this the last episode. And real quick, I'm going to pause. By the way, if you're just tuning in to our live stream, this is not our usual Monday. This is just a bonus episode. This is a non-format episode. We're just riffing. We're just talking. Everything's canceled in terms of everything shut down in LA. So why not?
We literally drove back across the country for me to reclaim my job. I worked 3 shifts and then now I'm not working again. So
we might be back here tomorrow. We might be back here on Saturday. We're just going to be doing a lot of pop-in bonus stuff. We might be doing stuff at the house in our studio that's not quite as nice as this one, but we're just kind of, so if you guys are tuning in and you're like, what are they doing? Why is this live stream going so long? How long have we been going? Can you check?
Let's see. 57 minutes or something.
Let's just keep going. Why not? This is just bonus content. Anybody who's still watching, thank you. Anybody who's not. So I'm going to talk for a second, sift through the comments. Let's answer some Q&As if anybody had any questions for us. But I think one thing I really feel strongly about is a lot of what we need to do in this country is empower people to have the opportunity to succeed when they hit adulthood. And what I mean by that is the world that we're at now, the way we go to school, I've talked about this a lot in the past. What we teach kids in school does not really prepare them for adulthood today. You know, all of the things I do now that earn me money, I learned mostly on my own from the internet. Now, I know that like going to school, I probably learned a lot of things, how to be like a well-rounded person and how to navigate through a college system and all that kind of stuff. But really, truly the thing, no good, nothing worth, okay. But thank you for watching live, whoever you are. I like how you're just like, no comments.
Well, no, I'm saying because we can't react to them like in real time.
That's
then
true.
we're like circling back. So
Fair.
definitely no, we love when you guys interact because that's what makes this so good.
Shout out Steve. I know you're always watching. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
Shout out
Steve.
Joey Houston. It's his birthday. One of our loyal watchers.
Happy birthday, Joe.
So let me ask you this, okay? So if you were President LaForce,
Madam President,
yeah. I would be remember you said I'd be a good first man.
Of course. You would like change the game. You'd be like on the cover of Forbes.
Why do you Forbes? That's like for rich people.
Okay.
Why would I be that's not important. But if you were Madam President LaForce,
right,
I would let you keep your last name as president. I wouldn't.
You would let me, huh?
I wouldn't.
Well,
I would.
shocker. I'm not taking your last name when we get married in general.
I know.
So.
I'm saying like I'm not. Okay, that's a poor phraseology. I would not that I would let you, but I wouldn't be like take my name. I'd be like stay LaForce. It's a great last name. But what would be kind of your like main things as a president? You'd be like, this is my platform. This is what I'm pushing for.
We have to change the way that we tax mega companies, and we have to put more regulations in place to create a separation between government and corporate companies. So, you know, like Home Depot, Chick-fil-A, Johnson & Johnson, all these mega companies should not be fielding half of their profits into, you know, the Trump campaign or into Biden's campaign or whatever. Like those should be separate. Corporations should be separate because then all of these things are coming together and there's too much power collectively in one place that we can't break apart. So that's very dangerous. Or we have to put a cap on the amount that they are able to, like corporations. Basically, what I would want to do is create enough tax breaks for them that you still have their support.
Yeah.
But then also create enough tax breaks for them that give back into the economy appropriately. So, for instance, of going back to what you said of minimum wage is based off of a competitive marketplace. So if there are more people that need jobs than are jobs, then you can pay people $14 an hour and nobody's going to complain because they need a job.
Well, dude, that's higher than minimum wage.
Right, I know. But I'm saying if you are taking all of your jobs and you're putting them in call centers outside of the U.S., or you're taking your car part plants and you're putting it outside of the U.S., then you're taxed on that. If you have all of your jobs have gone to automation, you are taxed on that. Because the other problem is, like, people are like, well, it's going to affect profits. Profits? These mother effers are still making plenty of money. So if the difference is you making filthy, dirty money or just filthy money, I, as the president, is going to make sure that you're staying here at filthy money, because I also understand capitalism. I understand that, like, these create competitive marketplaces that then create growth and create money. I'm not disregarding that. I understand that there's a lot of innovation and things like that are important. So I want to get back to a place where we can allow these capitalistic ideas to flourish in a way that doesn't become a pressure cooker on us and it's pushing it this way, right? So in turn, I would really want to work on taxation on the rich in a way to do it that not only continues to innovate them and wanting them to do good work, but also is asking them to put a certain amount of money back into the economy, right? And then the second one would definitely be I would want to work towards basically rehauling the education system. All of our textbooks should not be coming out of Texas, and Texas voters should not be able to decide what goes into textbooks. If it happened in real life, if we saw it on Twitter, it's fact-based and needs to be going back into our education. We need to be teaching people. There needs to be way more money in all of these American education systems. I mean, we're educating, I mean, I hesitate to say dumb people, but it's like, we to your point of, like, we need to have classes about race. We need to be talking about these things in classrooms. We need to be talking about mental health in classrooms. We need to have more resources for kids in school to reach out and to,
Our school system is so broken. I mean,
completely.
to me, the idea that I had to learn calculus and physics. I mean, listen, I understand like a base level. It's
Right,
great.
it's training your brain.
It's great to know Shakespeare and trigonometry, but there is no way you can argue that most adults in this country need to know that stuff more than they need to know about how mortgages work and taxes and how to start an LLC.
Well, but even going back to like emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
why have we created a society that's like, therapy is a subsect? That's bonkers to me.
That's a fairly new part of life too.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying, which again is like, it's crazy to me of like, that we clearly know that like, I mean, gosh, not even going into the pharmaceutical. I mean, what would I as Madam President do with like breaking down pharmaceutical companies? I mean, talk about big pharma, where it's like, we know that we have a opiate pandemic in this country, yet we continue to do that.
Yeah.
And then we're also criminalizing heroin and sending people.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
insane.
I mean, we clearly have a very, very, very sick society. But I also know that we have people who want better and deserve better and are smart and educated and want to help and ultimately just raise a good family that they're proud of, right? And so how can we give these tools from a starting base? How can we create these tools at 5 years old?
God, our kids are going to be so exhausted by us.
But you know what? They're going to be awesome. And they're
hope.
they're gonna, they're gonna know that they can ask for what they need. They're gonna know how to ask for their value. They're gonna know how to, ask questions when they feel like they're being served a shit sandwich, by an employer. They're gonna know how to, they might work for themselves. They might run for president.
I hope not.
I mean, it's like,
For their
listen,
sake.
as parents, like we're certainly going to mess up, and it's like all of that is real. There's no way around that. We're not perfect people. I've never
Speak for yourself.
Well, okay.
kidding.
I've never claimed to be perfect, but I think this resurgence in wanting to utilize my voice and even being okay.
Well, I've noticed in the timeline of our relationship, like especially the past few months, you're like urge to be like politically active is not the right terminology, but something in the realm of like activism and like a voice of social good is like skyrocketed. When I met you, it was more like, I want to be funny. And now you're like, I got to change the world. And I've noticed that you're getting like, I think a lot of your frustration, because you seem more frustrated than usual, is because you feel like you have all this energy to use, and there's like it's like you have like this currency and you haven't figured out how to spend it,
Well, because I don't know how to market it. I don't know what it is yet, right? Because it's like people who are like life coaches, that's their
but that's like a gimmick.
Well, I don't think that entirely, but yes, I hear that part of it. But I'm saying people who know what they're selling, or if they're like, I'm a corporate coach, or I'm like people who know what it is. I still don't know how to describe what it is that I'm wanting to do. And then I don't even know how to monetize it. Like I don't know how.
But why do you need to monetize it?
Because we want to have children and we don't have any money.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess let me like backpedal. Why don't you just do it and let the monetization part come as it comes?
Well, that's what I'm doing now. I mean, it's like I made my first video yesterday, which is like a hodgepodge of me being like, I don't know, guys, I just want to start talking to you and I don't know how I'm going to do it yet.
Yeah.
But it is where like I do.
I want to do that other project with you we talked about.
I know.
It's going to be awesome. I can't tell you what it is yet because it's not done, but
teaser.
I think it's one of the best things I've ever come up with.
You're so cute.
I'm serious.
It is. No, it is a great idea. It's hard for me both being like your soon to be wife, but then also like your producing partner. You know what I mean?
Can I switch gears for a second?
Sure. Well, I wanted to say one more thing about myself.
One more thing, yeah. And I'm just going to check if anybody had any comments and then.
Okay. Yes, I know that I want to share my voice beyond comedy. And I think that that's very scary for me because I'm like, I have built a career and an identity around I make people laugh.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Sure.
And so being at 34, so it's arguably almost like middle age, of now being like, wait a minute, I want to use my voice to challenge people and hopefully allowing my comedy to invite them in. That, if I can break them down, by making them laugh and be like, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong. And I'm not here to tell you that your experience is bad, right? All of those things that you are expressing that make you feel frustrated, right? And boxed in. That's not what I want to do. What I want to do is simply create a space where I'm just encouraging people. Here's another way that maybe you haven't thought about it before. And you don't have to take it. You could try it on. You could take it home and try it on for a little bit. You could bring it back. You know what I mean? Free return policy. But here is just something, this is food for thought.
Sure.
Here's something that you can think about. And you're right, maybe I don't need to be worried about with what it does or how it monetizes
Well,
itself.
I think I would encourage you not to, because it's just putting up a hurdle before. It's like saying like, I don't want to jump in the pool because, I might be wet longer than I need to be wet. And then it's like, just jump in the fucking pool. And then,
yeah, I know. And I'm sure it's been incredibly frustrating, like as my partner, to see this, like, this, and you have been incredibly patient with me. And I hope that you hear me when I say that of, wedding stuff.
We'll get to that next.
But please hear me when I say that of like, I am incredibly grateful to you for your patience in allowing me the space to make myself crazy. Right. I just want to say that because I'm sure people who have, if you've watched this whole time, been like, what do they agree on? Because
I want to make a claim just based on we love each other very much, and we fundamentally disagree on certain things, but I think we have the same values deep down. I just think we disagree on the nuances.
Well, and I also don't think that there's anybody who has had a different experience. Like, unless I chose to marry a woman, like I'm going to be marrying like a man. I'm meaning that like
what?
You saying again where I said, and you were like, well, I feel like you're telling me that because my experience isn't the same as you that I'm wrong. So I'm just saying that like no matter who I would be entering into marriage, unless I chose to marry a woman, I'm going to be engaging with somebody who has had a vastly different experience than me. And so again, I think that that's also a very toxic idea of like, oh, my partner is supposed to like think everything that I think. And like, there's this thing of like, well, if they don't agree with me on everything, then like that's bad. And it's like, no.
Well, I think this is what I would say just from our relationship, right? Is I don't think there's anything wrong. In fact, I think it's great to disagree with your partner on things that we have a lot of disagreements about. What I think is the important kind of like cornerstone to a healthy relationship is understanding that the relationship, which effectively means your partner's needs, have to come before your own. Not all the time, but a lot, right? So which is really the way that our country, if we all treated our country the way we treat a healthy relationship, we'd all be better off. There was a podcast in here the other night that I was engineering, and these two women were sharing stories of like toxic relationships they were in and how these guys they were with were very like controlling and wouldn't, it was clearly like they were always trying to mess with these girls' psyches to keep them felt like they were trapped in this relationship. And it's just, I don't know. I just feel, I appreciate that. I feel like we're both pretty good about like, when you have a need that I recognize, I'm like, my great example, right? I'll use this great example right now. I drove the whole way from Atlanta back to LA.
I love that this example paints you like a hero.
Because I am. Because I knew that you were going to have a really rough couple days when you first got back.
Yes.
For some things you had to take care of. So I was like, hey, but that's what I'm saying though. That kind of sacrifice is essential for a relationship to work.
Yes.
And I think that more people need to, I guess they do whatever they want, but I think it would be better for all of us if more folks in this country were willing to be like, and I think people would be willing to do more personal sacrifice if they felt like the results, they would see results that are better for everybody. But now I feel like we just, like this cycle of like, well, it's all screwed.
So, but that goes back into emotional intelligence. And that goes back into being able to identify what our, like patterns of behavior are. And then that goes into like generational trauma, right? Like, what does that mean? Like, there are all of these like spiritual or like emotional things that people disregard. And
What I've heard you say, but one more time, generational trauma is like what your ancestors went through has like trickled down to you.
yeah, so a lot of times, trauma is anything that you've experienced that has asked you to, that normally puts you in a fight or flight response, right? And so sometimes people can be traumatized around money. So if you grew up incredibly poor, your relationship to money is vastly different. Somebody whose their relationship to money is they've always had it, right? And so trauma doesn't necessarily mean that there was domestic violence in your household, right?
Sure.
Those are very visceral forms of trauma, but we experience it in a lot of different ways. There was a video. So I'm just going to use this as an example of Viola Davis posted this, and I want to get this.
Oh, I saw you put it on your Instagram earlier.
So and I don't have any service in here. Oh, come on. Viola Davis posted this video.
I understand.
I know, but I wanted to be able to quote this woman So Dr. Joy DeGuri, and she is a Black woman, and made this small video on generational trauma within Black women. And so it's basically this is like a butchered part of it, but basically she was saying how if Black women are told like, oh, your son is this, this, and this, and like told very complimentary things, her reaction might be to downplay those things, which for a while might make her son feel that mom is not seeing son. But as son grows up and becomes more aware of kind of this like secretive Black culture, right, that we're learning more and more about, of like Black people know that they always tell their kids how to dress or how to speak to police differently than like white parents don't have those conversations, right? So there's a lot of these secret things that happen within the Black community of kind of that nod between Black folks because they have a shared experience, right? So this son might not know that thing, but as he grows up, he learns, oh, that's actually a way that a Black mom is very, very proud. So that stems from all these things going all the way back to if you were a slave and working in fields, if a slave owner came up and started complimenting your son, you're going to downplay, no, he's not very good. He doesn't know how to do these things, because if you were to give him any sort of applause, that it just gives causation for a slave owner to trade that slave because they become very valuable, right? So there are all these ways in which we protect ourselves and protect people around us based off of trauma. And if something is not,
I wonder if like simply because of my Jewish heritage, I have to assume that someone in my family and my ancestors was like fleeing. We don't know why they came to the States, but when they got here around the time of the Russian pogroms, I'm assuming they were running away from persecution. I wonder like if certain ways that I act and think go back like 100+ years ago to when like
100%. I mean, absolutely. And this is not to say that like we don't have, this is why therapy and choosing to look at our patterns is so important and frankly empowering, because it allows us to make a new choice that then becomes a new set of things for generations.
Sure.
Right. And so like, even this is something to think about, where like you told me, educated me on a lot of the reason why Jews know a lot about like jewels or gems, right, is because that was something that they could quickly take with them and escape.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that in and of itself is a cause and effect of Jews were being persecuted for thousands and thousands of years.
Well, they weren't allowed to own land in a lot of under most kingdoms in Europe so it was partly that they literally could not own land. So they couldn't be farmers and things like that. They understood diamonds very well and things because they could, a lot of money in a very small size you could run and flee with. But then also, my understanding was there was some point in history in Europe where the Catholic Church, I could be wrong here, but something to the effect of where you weren't allowed to earn interest on a loan to another Christian, and money lending was considered a very dirty, gross job. And so the Jews became the money lenders. And then fast forward generations later, and they understand finance. I mean, not my family, like they're middle class, but like a lot of, and
Well, don't downplay. Your family is very good with
They've
money.
done
They own multiple properties. Like they
right, but they're not. They don't like have an intricate understanding of the banking system. I simply mean that like whatever.
I'm just imagining Bob in the room right now, and I feel like he would be like, I don't know, Alex. I feel like I've got a pretty firm understanding of.
No, I will say to my.
But you're just saying that your family's not like banking Jews. Is that what you mean?
They don't. They don't own an investment bank.
Sure.
But I simply mean though is that like one thing I hear a lot about sometimes is people are like, well, why do so many Jews have money? Why do so many Jews have money? It's like, well, part of why is because through many generations, it was like hammered into our culture, like to be educated and understand these systems. I guess what I'm saying is like I always get a little bit like my when people say that kind of stuff, the hair on my neck sticks up because it sounds like they're saying like, oh, it must have come from like nefarious means. There's no way it could have come from like, education and being super well versed in the intricacies of this. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but that's exactly why I think, taking it back to race one more time
Sure.
of like, that's why when we make these blanket statements about black and brown people, I'm sure a lot of them have that same response you do of like, that visceral response of like, when we make assumptions about large groups of people.
Right. But yeah.
But yeah, but so you're exactly right. So like even that idea of, that the way that Jewish culture is now is based off of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of like generational traumas. Right.
Yeah.
And so those
maybe
those or not maybe that's exactly right of like why they're all in banking or why, and again, why they're all, that's a blanket statement, but meaning like what we can trace as predominant features or jobs or.
Well, this is one thing I know that you could look at a point is that being educated, being uneducated, like historically in like Jewish culture is very shameful. Like at least for the males. Now I know that there was a time when like women were not, taught to be educated in Jew, like the very traditional I'm talking about, right? But one of the most important
It's a form of sexism.
No, but I'm just saying like, hundreds of years ago and even like in some segments of the most strict today. But like Jewish males would study constantly, like the Holy Scriptures. And so it's like education over and over and over is stress. Like that is the key factor. Whereas there like other cultures that may have not like stressed education over and over and over again, the ripple effects of that, you see that over time. So does that make sense? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, and it's also like what are survival mechanisms, because that's also when you talk about like, so sustained trauma and generational trauma, something that is a sustained trauma, meaning it repeats itself over and over and over again. Obviously it's created an adaptation. It's slightly different than, the reason why, again, going back to, the example I used earlier of, obviously a middle class Black mother in, a school setting downplaying her son's achievements is not because she thinks that her son is going to be sold, but that same mentality exists from all the way back of when it was, you have to downplay your son so that you don't.
I'm just going to take, I guess that whole experience is so foreign to me. I've never heard of like the Black mother downplaying her son's success before. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just like, that's like such a foreign concept
right,
to
me.
Me.
Right, of course, of like, where would you have experienced that?
Yeah, I guess it just seems strange, like, why that would still occur today. Like, wouldn't mothers be just like wildly proud of their kids?
So again, that's why talking about these types of traumas enable us to learn about them and know where they come from, because sometimes we don't even know why we do the things that we do. We don't know why we have certain responses to things. We simply do.
Yeah.
And so talking about them and being aware of them is so important. And so anyway, going back to, so that's connecting to what you were talking about with Judaism, which then went back to, somehow we got to all this through talking about our wedding.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, well, let's switch gears and talk about the wedding.
Okay.
I feel like House Rules has just become the like social issues podcast, which is fine.
What's wrong with that?
It's fine. It's just sometimes I want to take a break from all that shit. You know, here's the difference. Is like I am reading the news and Twitter and mainstream media and non-mainstream media a lot. So my brain is, I'm just realizing this now, is like when I come in here, I'm like, now it's time to be silly. Where you're like, you don't dabble in any of that because it exhausts you. And so we come in here, you're like, let's jump into it. So maybe I should just stop reading.
Well, I'm also just like, also wanting to know, like, what do you think you could make funny right now? Not saying, that's not like challenging of saying like you couldn't be funny, but I feel like I keep hearing you say this thing of like, well, our podcast is supposed to be funny.
No, our podcast is just our podcast. It could be anything. It doesn't need to be whatever. I don't know. It just it seems like lately, and I understand why it's, given the state of the world, there's a lot of angry, frustrated energy coming out of you whenever we jump into like, let's talk about stuff.
Of course, but I also want to be clear of like, it's not pointed at you.
Sometimes it feels like it is.
Well, I apologize for that. That's not it's not that like you.
What do you guys think watching and listening?
It's not that you are the problem.
I feel like I'm going to be in the wrong here.
It's simply, it's not even about wrong or right. I mean, of course you would feel that way. You're literally in the direction into which I'm talking, and what I'm saying is directed at you physically. But my anger is not at you. I mean, certainly it's like I get frustrated sometimes of like that your experience has been different than mine. And so it feels very invalidating when you say, well, maybe this is true, but I don't know. And I'm like, but I do know, right?
I want to clarify. It's not that I say maybe this is true, I don't know. It's that a lot of times when certain things are brought up, it's one of many factors that cause these things. And I think we have this we live in like a headline Twitter society. People want simple, fast answers to huge problems, and it doesn't work that way. It's not, you can't just point at this one, that's the reason it's broken. These things are super complicated, and it's really detrimental to just, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, and I hear that. Which is why, I mean, I feel like I've proven that I agree with that simply because I've said the real reason why people are not, in my opinion, willing to enact real change is because they're not going to see it in their lifetime. To really change and begin
that's true.
to dismantle these systems and create something better, it's going to take like generations and generations and generations of change.
I don't think it's just that. I think it's also when you say dismantle systems and make change for the better, the question becomes, what are we dismantling? Who is it better for? We need
more people on both sides that are running. I think for a long time we've had this idea that like there are politicians, right? Even to our people who are like, oh, I'm not much into politics. Well, now it's everywhere because it's our livelihood.
Yeah.
It's no longer a thing where it feels like, oh, we're voting on something that feels esoteric. It's now literally something that is affecting all of us every single day.
Sure.
And so we're learning, I think now of like, oh, politicians aren't a type of person. Politics is something that affects all of us. There's still the archetype of a politician.
I think the type of person who, listen, one of the best points that Colin Quinn made in that Red State, Blue State special, which if you have Netflix, watch it. It is phenomenal.
So good.
Is he points out that, well, people win campaigns based on how they dominate the media space, and you have to have money to do that. It's that simple. So until we figure out how to fix that problem.
But that's what I'm saying. But I feel like AOC, whether you agree with her or not, is the perfect example. Like, so if I'm looking at that just from like grassroots, politicking, getting people excited within your community, et cetera. So like you could still take that same amount of like all of those factors of how she not only attained one Senate seat and is now going in for another term.
Right.
That same idea is where we should be seeing this kind of like pop up everywhere.
She's in the Congress, by the way, not the Senate.
And thank you, Congress. And being able to like move. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense though?
I understand. It's a great example of grassroots organization actually working.
Right. And I think that it can exist more and more. I think it's just
Well, what I've said over and over that I hope we continue to do is I think people get overwhelmed at how broken a lot of these institutions are. So then just revert back to the local, whether it be in your local government, in your church, or your other community organizations. I think if people, that was one of the best takeaways that we had from being in Marietta for 3 months is we got to know our neighbors. And I felt like, yeah, it would be cool to be like part of the community here. Like like people that live in this, like I felt like we all kind of in that little neighborhood we were in, kind of generally looked out for each other a bit and kind of had like a nice vibe. Whereas being back in LA, it's like this amorphous blob of chaos.
well, it's just too many people.
I don't think we're meant to live in cities.
And
like humans, I don't think we should live in cities.
But again, so that's it. Another great. I think I've talked about this documentary before on the podcast, but it's called "Surviving Progress," and it's all about how and this is documentary is now maybe 4 years old, so it'd be interesting to see kind of like a revamp of it.
Yeah.
But that we've progressed so much as a society in such a short amount of time that we are now creating negative progress. And I think it's that same thing. Shout out Adam Lombardi. I was talking to my buddy Adam and I was like, dude, there are 40 million people in the state of California. That's too many people. So it is like, there are all of these things that have created where we are. And I also think it's so important. What I also want to continue to endow people with is we have to stop saying, well, what can I do? My voice isn't important. It's like where you put your money is important. Where especially the smaller amount of money that you have, so you feel that your financial power is smaller.
The less money you have.
Right.
Yeah.
That is even more important and vital.
Sure.
So it's just, it's kind of all of these ideals that I think are very important. And so, sorry, just going back of like, yeah, I am angry. I am frustrated. I'm frustrated that we are such a vibrant and wonderful, country mixed of so many different subcultures and countries and ideals and points of view that that is all being stifled and disrupted by this two-party system that is set up to protect itself.
I think and I think you'd agree with me on this. I think one of the biggest problems we have why we're at where we're at is people feel like their lives don't have like meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not, and listen, there's a lot of problems with organized religion, but there's a lot of great that's come from it. And, a lot of my friends who are devout Jews and Christians, and I just by circumstance, I don't have a lot of Muslim friends. I'd love to meet more. But folks, well, I'm just saying, like,
I just imagined like a meet cute of you just like meeting up with random like Muslims, and it was just a very funny.
Well, I just don't want to like dismiss.
I know. I think that's smart.
People who truly live their life and they feel like they're in service of Christ or Muhammad or God, like the Jewish God, whatever, right? When they're really doing it correctly, they're not, and they're not doing things hypocritically, and they're doing it correctly. Their lives are beautiful because they have meaning, and I think what one of the problems we're hitting now, and I know religion isn't for everybody. I'm not a religious person personally. I'm very kind of generically spiritual, and like I don't know, like is God real? Hopefully, but who knows, right? But I just mean that when people,
wow, what a powerful stance, huh?
When people feel like they're just kind of lost.
Yeah.
They revert into this like burn it all down attitude.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the middle ground is, but I feel like we have to, it's not a coincidence. This is happening. This whole social upheaval is happening when people feel like the system is rigged against them. Our healthcare system is broken. There are no jobs and the rich are getting richer, right? And so we have to find a way, what really the true root of all of this to fix our society is find a way to make people feel like they have good, meaningful lives. Now, some people would say that's to strengthen the American family. Some people would say that's to strengthen the economy. Some people would say to educate folks on health and wellness. I don't know. But that's the real, like, fixing a corrupt police system or fixing a corrupt corporate system, that's one element. Totally great. I'm all for that. But until we teach people how to empower themselves to have lives with purpose and meaning, we're going to keep hitting these problems over and over and over again. And we don't do enough of that. We don't strengthen that in this country.
So how do we do that?
I don't know. I can tell you on a small scale.
So then why do you get so frustrated with me when you're like, well, you don't like to argue from a place of fact and you only use emotion, when that's the most intuitive thing I've ever heard you say?
Well, let me finish my thought. I said what I meant to say before you cut me off. I don't know globally, but I think one thing we can do is lead by example. Stop crossing your eyes and mocking me right now. I'm trying to be important. I think what I just said is a great.
I'm trying to be important. Oh, you're so charming. Okay, go ahead.
I'm trying to say something of importance, rather, is what I meant to say. No, I don't care if I specifically am important, but I think the best thing you can do is lead by example. Raise good children. Be kind to others. I know it's as silly as it is, but it's the golden rule for a reason. Be kind to others. I always use our example, but our neighbors we became best buddies with in Georgia, beautiful, because we were just like, oh, these are great folks. And we just got to know them. We were like kind with their children. And, you know, I really think it's like when you enter a room, what's that phrase? Like, be the quiet one or something? Like, just go in. Haven't I heard you say that?
Be the quiet one.
It's like saying, like, when everybody's shouting, just listen and then lead by example, right?
Okay.
I don't know.
No, keep going. Why did you just peter out on your own thing?
Well,
You're saying like it's better to go and hear people out first, like listen first, talk second?
yeah, but that absolutely. But I think also what we really need more of in this country is people just. There's a lot of things we can fix, sure, but I think like we know so many people who are the same folks right now, and I think this is wonderful, but they're like in the streets marching like, we got to fix it. It's like, that's great. But they themselves have such issues that they need to work on that they're ignoring, that like I would be able to take them so much more seriously with their like motivation for justice if I knew that they could like have a healthy conversation in like, you know what I'm saying? Like they're
Sure. I mean, now you're talking about like misplaced anger and, you know, where people like if they, you know, have their own internal stuff going on and then they can like turn it towards something outwardly. I mean, that's a totally different conversation. And I think that you're right of things start within our own household. But I also think
house rules.
But I also think to
the rules of our house, you got to be kind to others.
I just want to encourage you not to open up a whole other can of worms because I really need to get lunch. I'm starting to feel faint.
We should wrap this up soon.
We've been here a very long time.
Bonus episode.
Bonus apps.
I think we're going to do this just for online. I'm not going to put this on the audio platforms.
Why?
Should we?
Yeah.
Because it's like you got to tune in live to catch it.
I mean, okay, but we just need people to tune in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
like,
true.
I'm not in a place where I'm like, shh, you got to know it's a secret to find it. Like, no, dude, we're here. You know what I mean? Download, subscribe, like,
That's a good
comment,
point.
share this with
All right,
your
fair
friends.
enough. Okay, so say your thing. I'm going to wrap us up, and then we'll go get lunch.
I think what you're saying in the idea of the golden rule is very important. I think it is fundamentally one of the most important.
Yeah.
But I also think that when we put that as the forward piece, it doesn't acknowledge that a lot of folks, if we don't also simultaneously fix all of these systems, that's a privileged point of view because you and I, for the most part, we might be affected financially by some of these choices.
Yeah.
My ability to choose whether I, want to have a child or would choose to, like terminate a pregnancy, those choices potentially could be taken from me. But outside of those, you and I and our family will always be okay.
Right.
Because of the families that we were born into.
I just want to clarify something. That's not a reality we're facing right now.
Of what?
You're debating about your autonomy over your own body.
No, I know, but I'm saying that like
depending on who gets elected in Supreme Court justices and stuff, that's the only issue that would affect you directly.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm saying, right now I'm just like trying to get a baby.
Yeah,
I
was
mean?
I just want to be very clear. Like,
no, but I'm saying,
please send your prayers to us getting pregnant within the next couple months.
Yeah. But I'm saying,
it's
yes,
a goal.
Please. We
want family ASAP.
Baby, we want some baby G's.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
would love to hit a fat payday, like a crazy big payday, so we could have like 4 kids. It'd be awesome. I would love to have 4 kids.
Okay, well, I'm 34,
Two
so I don't know if I can make that dream happen for
To
you.
quote my hilarious friend Brian McDaniel, his funny joke, we'll get 2 purebreds and 2 rescues.
I cannot believe he tells that joke.
It's
That
so
is-
funny. I think it'd be cool to have 2 adopted kids and 2 biological kids.
Yeah, I would love, and you know, God forbid if we can't have them biologically, we'll adopt all of them.
Yeah. Anyway,
But so all of that is to say, because you and I are in positions of privilege, our lives will minimally be affected.
Sure.
And so I think that's even why, not that anybody needs me to be a white savior and not that anybody needs me to speak for them, but I think it's also why I feel even more of like the need to use my voice, because there are so many people who are very affected by our apathy. And there are people who, you know, and I even think about it of like, you know, from a place of like creativity and innovation and like all of these people that because they're born into certain families don't get the same, you know, and listen, I understand that like, you know, humans have been around for hundreds of years. There's always people that, you know, are towards the front of the line and people who are towards the back of the line, and nature's cruel and it is what it is. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I also think that like, if I allow that to just be fact and don't try and don't utilize my voice to help other people, then like, what am I doing? Comedy is great and it's important and it creates reprieve for people and it creates healing for people. And it doesn't mean that using my voice for things that aren't funny doesn't also take away from the things that I can contribute as to being funny.
Sure.
But I think to your point of, okay, so what are you going to do to create change? I'm going to keep using my voice in ways that scare the shit out of me. And I'm scared of offending people, and I'm scared of people not liking me. And I'm scared of saying the wrong things as, you know, a white person, or, you know, not having all my facts right or whatever. But I also know I would rather try and fail than just keep like writing jokes because it's safe.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I need to get a sandwich.
Well, on that note, guys,
this has been like 2.5 hours, and I hope, you know, that some of you have watched and still like us, and, you know.
Well, look, on that note, guys, thank you for watching and listening, if you did. So, look, here's how this podcast is going to work moving forward. We're going to continue to always do our Monday night live stream with our segments that we do that are always so fun and silly, like Should We Buy This for Our House and Hell No or Let's Go. Usually here, sometimes at our home studio. What? Would you make that
lip smacking?
Okay, anyway.
Like, it's awful.
But, you know, given that everything is kind of crazy now, there's not a whole lot going on. We're going to do a lot of these little bonus surprise live streams because, you know, why not?
We came back to LA and then for my job, and then my job was like, JK, you don't have a job again for 3 weeks. So we've got plenty of time to talk about these things and make content.
I think I'm going to bring my laptop next time and so I can kind of do more interacting with our people commenting.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I want to really incorporate. So, Steve, shout out. Thank you so much for all your comments. Ross, some other.
Yeah, Steve, you kind of had me on the bandwagon of moving to Whittier, and then I found out you can't have chickens. What's that about? Can you give me some feedback on that? What's going on?
But we can have goats. He's got goats.
I know.
Steve,
you got to have us out to Whittier.
I'm sure he'd love to have us out
social
there.
distance. We'll wear masks.
Anyway, but we appreciate you guys who comment and chime in live. I'm going to find a way to do more of that in the future. But yeah, anyway, every Monday you'll see us again, and stay tuned for more of these surprise little impromptu live streams.
Yeah, so as always, you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. If you know where to find us, please share our stuff. Let people know that you like listening to us, you like watching us. I know it seems like a big ask, and it's also a very small thing that helps us immensely as we continue to build this brand and talk about our points of view and make things funny and also make things very real. So we appreciate you. Wear a mask, be safe, take care of you and your own. Send us any questions or anything. As always, you can send us all sorts of information, stuff to talk about. We are going to be returning back to our segment, so if you have anything that you want my opinion on, send us a question for LaForce. What's my course? And Joey Houston, happy birthday.
See you later, guys. Bye.
Bye.